from the bottom, we are going to be sewing 3/4 of an inch along the hem. So here it's going to be 3/4 of an inch, just there. Everybody see, just at the hem? And then I'm going to pivot and sew a 1/2 inch everywhere else. The only reason we do it 3/4 of an inch in the hem is it's going to be a double fold hem, 3/8 and 3/8, and this makes it line up perfectly, okay? When you come around the neckline, I would recommend pinning and basting this. You have a lot of layers all together now. It's important that everything be even. So along the neckline, I would pin it and then baste it. What you can also do is this. Work from center back down one side and then work from center back down the other side. Start at the center back, both pinning and basting. The reason being that if you line up center back and it's perfectly aligned, it means that both sides are going to be even from center back. What I'm going to do is this. Along the neckline, it's worth taking the extra time and basting. There's my center back. I'm going to baste at slightly less than a 1/2 inch. Matching up all my raw edges, and every time you sew something, you want to make sure that you've sewn it smoothly and evenly so that there are no tucks in any of the fabrics. Particularly around the shoulder seam, it's very difficult. Lining up all my raw edges, so it's the collar, it's the blouse, and the facing that are all being lined up. And I'm basting this all together until I come to center front. Okay. And then what you can do to sew is this. From center back, we're going to be sewing all the way along center front. Now remember, we already have one row of stitching, so I'm going to make sure I stitch just below that row of stitching, correct? Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Now remember, I have that row of stitching because I've attached the collar to the blouse, right? So starting at center back, I'm going to sew slowly and carefully where I've just basted. Take a few stitches, reverse, and making sure that you're just below your row of stitching. If you're at all nervous about your sewing, just baste this, okay? It'll be the right thing to do. I'm going to swing around to center front. Pivot at the 1/2 inch. And when you get to the bottom, you're going to pivot and sew 3/4 of an inch along the facing edge. Okay, so this is what I've done. 3/4 of an inch at the bottom of the facing, a 1/2 inch along center front, a 1/2 inch along the neck, which is sandwiching the collar between the blouse and the facing. The last step is I'm going to trim the facing, angle the corner, then I'm going to trim just the facing at the hem, not the blouse. We need the blouse. And I'm going to trim all the way up center front, cutting off an 1/8 of an inch. We're going to continue by trimming all the way along the neckline. We're going to continue by trimming the facing and trimming the body of the blouse. So we're going to trim the whole neckline all the way around, okay? I'd like to see it trimmed, and then you're going to flip it to the outside, okay? So that's for next week. Now, I'm going to just try and press my seam allowance on my facing as well as I can. I'm going to push out my corners with my pointer. If you need to go back and trim a little bit more, you might have to do that.
Do you press the seams towards the center or the...
It doesn't really matter, we're just going to be pressing them flat. I could probably trim that a little bit better. Press center front right on the seam. Okay, you're pressing center front flat right on the seam. And then you're going to go around the neckline and press your facing down so it lays flat. And you're going to do that all around the neck. Okay?